and welcome back to another class of your financial PR. Now, this is where we will be continuing on communication strategies part two. So, welcome to part two of your lecture. Now, before we get started, let's just go to a little bit of flashback of our previous lecture and to see, hold on, let me adjust my mic. Yeah, just for us to get back into what we have done previously, and to see how far we have studied. Okay, now, so in the previous lecture I discussed about communication strategy, and I spoken about a couple of communication strategy, which is number one. I discussed about the media. Okay, so I talk about how, in terms of the media, how are you supposed to communicate with them in order for you to bring out some of the important things about your company and so on, right? Now, also besides the media, I talk about how to deal with them. I talk about the second communication strategy, which is roadshow. So I discuss about how this roadshow is specifically for the investor, where you have meetings with them. Okay. Now, there is roadshow where you're trying to raise fund for your company, and then there's a second type of roadshow where is what you call as the non-deal roadshow. Okay, so the non-deal roadshow is like a information kind of a roadshow. Okay, where you just go around doing presentation to your investor by just spreading information. It's not so much of asking them to take money and so on, but it's more of that, right? Now, what about annual general meeting? This is where we ended the previous lecture. So in the previous lecture, I discussed where when you talk about annual general meeting, it's where you release various kind of information, especially release of a first quarter result, highlights of some event. And then, of course, your CEO is the main star when it comes to the annual general meeting. And he will be highlighting on events, talking about what's happening in the company, how he or she feels about the current economic climate. And also, of course, they will do some major corporate announcement during the annual general meeting. So this is where people tend to get very tense. If you're an investor relation officer, you tend to get very tense when it comes to time for annual general meeting. Why? Because you are basically it's the pinnacle of your year. Okay, it's the time, that one time in the year where you can show your investor, look, we have given you your money worth. You invested this much on us, and then this is what we have in return for you. And of course, during times like this is where, of course, investors will have a lot of questions during AGM. That's where IRO gets very stressed out. CEO gets very stressed out because this is the time where you are answerable to people. Okay. Now, well, it's not so bad if you're making a lot of money for your investors. It's a good thing. But of course, annual general meeting can be very stressful whenever there are some of your decisions, some of the CEO decisions that could be bound for questions, okay, by the people and so on, right? And during annual general meeting, this is where it's a meeting where directors and media are encouraged to be there. So like I said in the previous lecture, okay, there's a lot of kinds of director, right? You have the executive directors and non-executive directors. The directors are not always there in the company. And because they can be very busy people, they can be someone who is from the top management, who is running other companies. This is not the only companies that they have, and so on. Now, with that in mind, okay, there will always be a way for you to get the directors to be there. You see, when your directors show up in full force, that's when your investors feels more confident, right? This is where you have to pay fees to the director. Like I said, money runs the world, people. Yes, so money runs the world, people, and therefore sometimes you need to pay the fees to the directors to get them so that they will be there. I know, right? You must be thinking to yourself like, really? Pay money just for them to be there? I'm sure you wish that you get paid just to come into class, right? So anyway, yeah, then of course at the same time, usually during this time IRO is very busy during the annual general meeting because they have to create media kits, and then you will be one of the company representative to be on standby. Now, who are the people that you talk to during this annual general meeting? Largely, if you're talking about IRO, you are usually talking to the media people. So during the annual general meeting, you're always on standby, because just in case that the media has any question with regards to some of the figures, or they have some questions that is related to what your investors might want to know. So you are there, you are there to talk to the media people. You are there to give them the answer, right? And at the same time as well, these are the kind of moments where before the AGM starts, you get very busy, because as an IRO, you need to post the notice of the AGM to tell them when it's happening and so on. And of course, in order for you to want all your investors to also be there to listen to what you have to say, or your CEO has to say, you kind of have to do the video of the events to attract the investors to come. And this is not just talking about your current investor, but also your potential investor, people who are interested to invest into your company. These are the moments that you have to convince them to come into your company, to invest into your company, right? Now, so yeah, this is annual general meeting. That's the third way of communication strategy that you have. And then the next one that you have is actually a plant tour. Now, this is where the communication strategy part two. Um, Again, the previous lecture was a bit long, so therefore I don't want it to be too long, and I separated into two parts, right? Now, just talking about plant tour alone, right? Plant tour can be long and it can be short, all right? Now, in terms of plant tour, it's just basically bringing people to see your company. Now, this kind of plant tour can be, especially if, let's say, you're an oil and gas company. Okay, so if you're an oil and gas company, or if you're a company that has factory, basically, okay. So if you have a factory, or a place for you to exhibit the way you do your work, right? That's time where investors will want to come. Now, even the universities can have a plant tour, right? I mean, when you first came to Taylor's universities to scout around, right? That's where people will bring you to campus tour, right? Yeah, so campus tour is like it's kind of a version of plant tour, right? Um, because yeah, so plant tour is just showing people what your company has and what does it do, right? Okay, so now plant tour can be long, and it can be really short. Now, you'll be amazed to know that I've been to an event. Basically, I emceed the event where it's actually a, what do you call it, a mosquito breeding factory. So what do I mean by that? You know the repellent that you use every day, the mosquito repellent, right? So when you use the mosquito repellent, how do you know that it's going to work on a mosquito, right? You test it on them. Yeah, I know, human cruelty, okay? But anyway, so when you talk about that, right? So what happened is that I was there, and they have this lab and place where they actually breed the mosquito. You see, they breed and they make sure there's a lot of mosquito for them to test the repellent on. I know it can be absolutely cruel for them to do that, but yeah, that's the way how you test whether those repellents works or don't, right? So now a plant tour can be long, can be short. If let's say you go to a coffee making place, right, as to see how they do the coffee beans and so on, it can be a very short tour. So now, as an investor, you will want to know what this company is doing, how is the process, how they do it, and so on. And this is a time where investor relation officer will organize a plant tour for their potential investor or even their current investor. Usually it involves a very formal kind of presentation to the participant. But and who are these people? Usually, like I said, key investor, even sometimes financial analysts will be interested, member of media, and even now the another group that you have to be very careful of now is actually the environmentalists. Okay, because the environmentalists, they are very I mean, they will want to make sure that everything that you do inside your company is pretty much environmental friendly. Okay, so sometimes they will request for a tour in your plant, and you got to show them that your processes is environmental friendly and all that. You know, that's part of your image, your branding, and your CSR, right? And of course, you might say, "Oh no, does that mean I need to be the one that arrange. Yes, you arrange the plant tour, but are you supposed to be the one that do all the briefing? No, because you see, there will always be someone who is more specialized, right? Someone who knows the plant better than you do. So your job is always to just organize the plant tour, but you don't lead it, okay? Because you will have some facilities managers who will do the briefings and not you. All right. Now, and of course, your job is also to make sure that whoever the employees is there at the point of time, they are well briefed on what can be said and what can't be said. All right. So again, your job is to arrange it. Now, beside plant tour, just now we talk about annual general meeting, right? So annual general meeting means it's actually meant for general, right? General people. There is actually another kind of meeting of what we call the annual analyst meeting. Now, the annual analyst meeting is always aiming at financial analysts, okay? Where because financial analysts they're very good with figures. They know their figures, they know their mathematics, they know their comparison and so on. So annual analyst meeting is always running concurrently with the annual general meeting or right after annual general meeting, right? Where the meeting is specifically for the analysts. It's normally held in HQ. Um, and during the annual analyst meeting is where usually you have things like product demonstration, okay? Product demonstration, where you show them what are some of the new products that your company came up with, and of course also at the same time, you get outsiders to endorse your product. Kind of like maybe you get an expert. Let's say your company is oil and gas company, right? Um, you might want to ask someone from the oil and gas industry, say for example an environment expert, say for example, and this environment expert will he's not part of your company, but you invite him, and he give a talk about how your company is achieving the best kind of way to take care of the environment. So you got someone from outside, an outside expert, and then this outside expert will talk about the industry trend and so on. So there's many kinds of experts that you can get for this part, and so that's good. Okay, so that's very good. Now, usually during the annual analyst meeting is when your senior management will show up in full force, because they are there to answer the questions of the analysts, and your job as an IRO once again is to arrange the logistic and to coordinate the event. And annual analyst meeting should be conducted consistently so that people can keep up, with what's going on. And these are the times where you disseminate industry information and keep up with the analyst concern, right? And again, because in annual general meeting, you cannot probably address everyone's concern, and so during this time of annual analyst meeting is where you can cater specifically to the analysts. Now, having said all of that, I gave all of you the different communication strategy, right? Annual general meeting, annual analyst meeting, plant tour, road shows, the media, and so on. Now, at the end of the day, right, you can have all the strategies that you want, but if you don't have a good story to be sold, then everything is practically useless, right? So, what do I mean by you need a good story? This is the part of my lecture where I'm going to share with you all about how exactly do you create a company story or the message. Okay, now for an investor relation officer, okay, investor relation is a very important part where you uses PR to actually push some communication and financial goal at the same time. That's where IRO job is very interesting because it combines PR with money. Okay, and you want a simple story that makes your investor believe in your company and invest in your company. So you remember that your story cannot be a complex story. You may say you may create a story of this company was once upon a time in a big debt, I mean, and then we come up with this product, and then you have all these technical terms, and then say, okay, we are looking into the future, blah 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 blah. And the more your stories become very complex, the more you lose your investor, and the more your investor feel like you have a very high level of risk. Okay, now it's always good that your company story or the message that you're trying to send to your investor is always focused and straightforward. Okay, now, it's always good that in order for you to come up with a story or the message of your company, you start with the investor relations audit. Now, what is an investor relation audit? Is where you gather information. You gather information, you look at what's in the public filing, you interview your management, you look at the industry trend, you look at your competitors or your peer company, look at what is their focus, what is their story. Okay, what is it that they are trying to promote, what is so special about them. Once you gather all the information, then you have to think about your company. Okay, so what is the one line that I can use to describe about my company? One line story, just one line, kind of like a tagline, but it must be able to tell the story of your company to the investor in a financial sense. So the story of how you create this story will eventually impact your valuation. That means your value in the market. Okay. Now let's say your company is diverse. That means it has so many business under one. Just like how you do annual reports. Some companies they are into property, they are into property, they are probably into tourism, they are probably into cruise, blah blah blah. They have so many things at one shot, right? Now, when if your company is too diverse, you don't try to come up with one line story that fits everything into one. Because when you try too hard to blend everything into one, it becomes unfocused, like I said. Okay. And then it results in lower valuation. That means people look at your company in this one is a jack of all trade and master of none. Okay. So it's not gonna be really good. Okay. And always while you're creating the message, you think about what will resonate with your investor. What is it that you think will hit them, eventually? Now, of course, the way how you package your story. So you have one line of your story, and then you talk about the packaging. You talk about how it's an excellent prospective investment opportunity. So in your story, you must talk about how this is actually a very good investment opportunity. My company is a very good investment opportunity. You show some of the testimony of high profile customer. Make sure it's high profile. That means famous people, okay, not just ordinary people. You talk about who are your key customer, who are the main people who has been benefiting from your company. How is your technology more superior? How is your company's ability to penetrate or get into new places, new region, right? Or that the size and the quality of your company's sales has been increasing? What are some of the marketing efforts you have been putting out? That your team, you have a very good management team. And again, lower cost doesn't make a good storyline anymore. Okay, not everybody goes for cheap stuff, because sometimes people have the awareness that cheap stuff doesn't equals to good stuff anymore. So just even if you have something really cheap, you don't try to like think that that will be the only thing that will make your story good. So you have to ask yourself if you have any of this and what are the aspects that you are trying to promote. And then, of course, you ask if there's any hook or bait. I'm sure you all know what is clickbait, right? Now, even as a company, as an investor relation officer, you do try to come up with a hook or a bait. Okay, you try to make people feel like your company is somewhat uh, what's the word for it? They look forward to know what you can do, what your company can do. All right. And of course, if let's say you project or your earning guidance show that in the next quarter or 3 months or so on, that you will make very good money, that can be part of your packaging of your story. So you have to come up with a one line and then talk about how you want to package it. In another word, you're trying to show people what is so special about your company. Now, in the story of why your company is so good, okay, you must maintain the story. You don't boast and then can't do it or can't deliver. So you must always stay credible in meeting your goal. You got to make sure that whatever story that you come up with, your company can meet it. Okay. And if you broke trust before, you need to regain the trust. All right. And of course, you got to have consistency in following through your stories. And yeah, make sure that your story is consistent. It doesn't change from time to time, right? I'm sure you have a friend where this moment they tell you one thing and then the next moment they tell you another thing, and then you never know when they are telling the truth. You don't know which one is actually, or they can be at one moment very gung-ho about something, that means very into something, very enthusiastic about something, and then the next thing you know they will tell you, oh, I'm no longer interested in that thing, I'm interested in something else. Now they are not consistent. When they are not consistent, that's when you feel like um you don't really trust this person, right? Because this person is not consistent. So therefore you must have a consistency in following through your story. And of course, if there is a risk that your company is facing, like, I mean, come on, let's face it, okay? COVID-19, every company is facing crisis at this moment. There's always a risk in business now. And then you gotta, kind of like clarify, okay, look, I know we are facing this problem, but this is how our company are planning to navigate it. This is how we are planning to resolve it. All right. And of course, sometimes things like one owner owning too much of the market share doesn't sound good for investors, because they feel like, oh, well, that means I don't get to have any say. You own like most of it. Why do you need me anyway? So things like that can be a risk that you might want to be honest with your uh, investors. Okay. And of course, if let's say you foresee that for the next quarter, the result of your company might fluctuate. That means go up, go down, go up, go down. You might want to tell them, for example, you say, oh, if let's say I'm a winter coat company, usually, people travel in this month and therefore we see better business during this month. And then during the time of summer, probably not so good. So you gotta forewarn your investor when your business is good, when your business is not so good. So they know and they won't get panicked when it happens. And of course, you have contingency plans. So in case of any crisis, uh, in your story, you got to talk about how you are planning to navigate through all the problems, and what is your plan B, plan C, plan D, right? Okay. Um. So creating the story is important. Maintaining the story is even more important, right? And of course, as you are talking and as you are creating story about your company, you must match where your company wants to go with your story. The story must, like I said, consistent and be truthful. Um, Maybe the next direction that your company is going is that, or they want to penetrate, say, the European market. But in your story, you kind of discuss European a little bit, and then the next thing you know, you talk about Japan, China, or just some other countries which is not really related to Europe. Again, this not matching with where your company wants to go, right? And your actions that you take must align with your story. Like I said, if let's say you tell them we want to be the number one company in the Europe market, but the next thing you know, as you're going on about your story, people find that it's weird that you seems to be focusing on products that and also sales in say areas like China, for example. Excuse me for a moment. Yeah. Okay. All right. For example, if you let's say you're talking about sales in China, they'll be like, oh, where is the Europe in your story, right? So actions that you take must align with the ultimate story. And like I said, maintaining it, sticking to one story as long as possible is important. You only change your story when you have new competitors, or that things has changed, or that laws and regulations has changed. Only then will you change your story. Otherwise, you gotta be consistent with the story of your company. People like consistency, right? And of course, your story at the end of the day, because you are an IRO, you talk about financial communication, you have to coordinate with the PR team. The story must also align with the PR effort. So yeah, your story must always align with the PR effort, right? I'm sure some of you are PR students, right? So the thing is, if you are doing public relations, you do events, you do marketing of product, you talk about community service, um you do a lot of things about branding, imaging, and so on. But PR is very much short term because they want to do what gives them immediate result. Whereas IRO, you are always looking at long term result. Your company's a financial aim eventually, right? So IRO will always have a more long term kind of a goal and functions that they are looking at. And therefore, they have to coordinate with the PR team to make sure that whatever that the PR team is doing, it aligns with what they want to do in the future. It aligns with the IRO. And IRO always need to coordinate with the PR manager, and therefore, usually in every company, PR and IRO, they are always reporting to the same manager. Yeah. So yep. Now that is the part two for the lecture. So thank you very much, guys. Now I'm gonna upload this, and I look forward for your feedback. Okay, so please watch over your times for what you need to do for the week as well. So thank you very much, guys. I'll see all of you. Bye.